Hi, everyone. Bob Dietrich here with another edition of the ADHD Toolbox. And today we have Naomi Aldort. Did I pronounce your last name correct? Aldort? And Naomi is, this is going to be a fascinating topic because Naomi is the author of Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. And, you know, in this edition of the ADHD Toolbox, we're talking about how do you bring out that brilliant side of your child. And I know, or even yourself if you have ADHD. And I know it can be difficult at times, especially if you have ADHD and you're struggling, or your child has ADHD and they're having a tantrum or you know, this constant meltdown, or you're struggling in school. It's hard to see the brilliant side. And sometimes the tantrums are happening because of what you're doing with them. And they just want more freedom. They want something that's going to allow them to be who they are. And then the brilliant side comes through. So we're gonna talk about that today. And how do you bring the brilliant side through and handle the behavioral and learning challenges at the same time? Naomi's an expert on this. Naomi, welcome to our program. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted.
Oh my gosh. So you got tons of experience here. You got your book, Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. I love that title because it kind of tells you exactly what that's going to be about. And you guide parents by phone or Skype sessions and workshops internationally. Your guidance is not about gentle ways to control your child, but about how to have peace without having control. So I love how you say that. This is about a way of being. What you teach is about a way of being and of understanding children so they can do their best, not because of fear, and not because they fear us or they seek our approval, right? But because they want to and they want their own free will. And so you talk a lot about freedom and how freedom is the key. So we're going to dig into that. So ladies and gentlemen, Naomi, her objective is to bring peace and clarity to difficult situations. And I know you know what I'm talking about, as well as to ordinary parenting and family issues. So from attachment parenting to optimal learning, siblings, aggression, sleep, traumas, teens, marriage, educational choices, food, and more, Naomi works holistically toward a peaceful and powerful parent relationship situation. Now, you have something called the SALVE, SALVE communication formula. So we're going to learn more about that today too. And it has been praised by providing the best of the work of Brian Cady and nonviolent communication combined. So we're going to learn all about that today. So let's dig in and let's talk about, first let's talk about the labeling. And because I know a lot of times we get stuck in the label. Oh my gosh, my kid has ADHD, and I think I know what that is. But it can be so different across so many different situations. Let's talk about the labeling versus the way a child really is.
Yeah, so labeling, parents tell me that sometimes the label helps them because they think, oh, now I understand what's happening to my child. They have this. The problem with that is, of course, that we are stuck in thinking that something is wrong with the child. Mm-hmm. And it comes from a misunderstanding because this doesn't exist. It's not that first there were all these phenomena of something wrong with the child and they're born with it, and now we are finally discovered it. Instead, they're different human beings. And when a person is different than the stock behavior that we are expecting, especially in school, but as a culture, we have certain expectations of how a child would behave. So we have a norm, and when the child has different norm, or doesn't fit our norm, then we struggle and we think something is wrong. So we come up with labels of the different, not norm kind of kids. Mm-hmm. So when I help parents, I actually try to help them to get outside of needing that label or thinking that it's actually a something, and realizing you have a very unique, awesome, amazing, brilliant child. And your child doesn't fit mm-hmm. the stock expectation of how a child should be or how they should learn. So what I teach parents is to meet that child on his, her terms so that they can flourish for who they are. We don't want to treat a cat like we treat a dog, to take a far analogy. But, if you expected all cats to bark, you would be, defining them all as disabled in some way and need all kind of treatments to get them to bark. And in a way, we're doing that, and it's not helpful. Mm-hmm. So in my approach, there's no medication, but there is a ride into the child's life, joining the child, seeing what she or he needs, and letting them be that so that they can flourish.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm thinking of an analogy as you're talking about it, and it's like saying somebody has a cold, right? But is it a head cold, or is it a chest cold, or do they have a runny nose, or do they have fever? Are they coughing? And so there's different things at colds, but there's only a couple things with colds. So you got to take that times like 1,000 for ADHD. There could be so many different things that are going on with ADHD that you don't know exactly where they are. So you say ADHD, but your idea of what it is could be way off from what your child is going through.
Well, especially because I don't even define it as something wrong with the child.
Right. Yeah.
I define it as this is this child. He's just, that's his way. I don't even say it's different. Right. We're all different. And really the mistake we're making is limiting how we're supposed to be by expectations, especially in the school setting, or how one should look. And then the child doesn't fit our expectation, then we say, well, there is a cold or there's something wrong. But there isn't even that. It's just a child with a lot of energy, with spatial these needs or those needs. And I don't even call them spatial. They're who they are. Like, we're also different. Any one of you is married, know that once you know the person close enough, they're, a world different than anybody else you ever met.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So step one here, and the first thing we're talking about is labeling. And if you can get rid of that label and just see the child for someone you've never seen and you've never defined before, and let them fill in that and color in that space.
And learning, then you become, instead of anxious that your child is not like everybody else, now you're curious. And now you can prevent those tantrums because you are actually on the trajectory of the child's agenda with curiosity, like, who is this creature? How does his mind operate? What do I need to provide so that mind would flourish into its optimal flower? So it's like I say in my book, in one of my quotes at the top of a chapter is, you don't water a flower if it grows, you water a flower so it'll grow. And you need to water that particular flower and feed that particular child the way that will help them be the best of who they already are, that you will have to discover rather than to quench and put in a box where, okay, but you have to be this way. You are the learner of who they are and how to make them flourish in their own way.
Yeah, how great would it be to replace frustration and anxiety with curiosity, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's unconditional love. Then you just love them the way they are with that curiosity. Who are they? Notice.
Yeah.
And it helps to be a parent because you start actually seeing. When I work with families, and I have families come here like sometimes for a whole week or for a few days to work one-on-one with me, or just on Skype internationally or on Zoom like this. And they always look at me like, for years, I didn't realize the reason. And Naomi, you see it right away. You see the child. And I tell them, I don't even know where that comes from, but I know that I'm being present to the child rather than to my reaction to the child or expectation or any of the mind chatter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, okay, so that's like step one, right? The first thing you want to do is get rid of that label. Step two, though, is where I really excited about, because I want to talk about this because it sounds so interesting and it just resonates to me. So it's about how freedom to be their own way allows their abilities to shine. How giving the child freedom allows them to be brilliant and also can resolve some of the behavioral issues. So, can you tell us about freedom, how freedom is so key?
Well, let's look at one shining star in our history, Thomas Edison.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't behave well. Maybe he was ADHD. They didn't define it this way then, but the
Right.
teacher said he's a dunce and he can't focus, etc., etc. His
Mm-hmm.
mother took him and homeschooled him.
Mm-hmm.
What did the kid do? Try, they say, 1,000 times or whatever to create a ball eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was now rooted in himself rather than living his life in this anxiety of something is wrong with me, I have this or I have that, and I have to be like the other kids, and I have to pass these tests and please these teachers and parents. This kid was doing what he needs to do in freedom, and he was an inventor and a researcher, and that's how he was from childhood. Or I can tell you a story of a client of mine. This father was complaining that his very active daughter was doing nothing all summer long on summer break, but riding her bike around the house, or scooter, excuse me, it was a scooter, very close to the walls of the house, again and again and again. And, the parents were going like, come on, do something, study, play something else, learn something, let's go here, let's go there. She's going around in a circle. And I told him, she is learning something. She is devoted with passion to something, and we don't know what it is. And I said, go watch her with curiosity. See if you can detect what she's watching, what she's doing. She was pretty young, like 6 years old or something, or 7. And so another week when he had a session with me, and I said, well, what did you discover? He said, she is learning relativity. She was looking at the speeds. She was changing speeds and looking at how when she's close to the wall looks like it's moving. And then he finally, out of curiosity, looking at her and also later having a conversation with her, asking her, so when you're on the bike over and over again, what's so fun about it? And she said, when I go fast, the wall goes fast. When I go slow, the wall goes slow, but the other side doesn't go, it's further away from me. So she started to discover the whole relativity, speed, the directions, and he didn't realize that. And she was passionate. Of course, she also needed the physical movement. And I told him, even if she wasn't discovering anything, it's like, it's a nice story. Hey, she was studying relativity. All of a sudden, we're so forgiving and thinking, oh, fantastic. But what if she wasn't? What if she was having a great time feeling her body, having the physical experience of riding her bike? That by itself is worthwhile, and allowing her to be in touch with herself. So that's like personal experience. Also, they're learning in so many different ways that we don't realize. This is just one example of it. They're learning leadership. They're learning how to argue when they fight with their friends. They're learning to build. They're learning what doesn't work. They need to move their bodies. Excuse me. All children learn a lot through the experience of the body, a lot more than adults, which is why sitting at a table, at a desk, is not conducive to learning for most kids, actually. Even those who don't have any definition of something is unusual. But a child who's especially one that needs to move a lot, you let them move, and all of a sudden the magic came out. Oh, now they can do this, or they discovered this, and they learn. So they're free to find their passion. So another result that I see in this freedom is with our curiosity and watching the child and providing what they want, whether it's a swing or a rope swing, or building, or doing something physical like somersaults, And we provide for it. We take them to those activities. We provide at home mattresses. We had a queen size bed opened in the living room for kids to just do somersaults all day long as much as they want. And when families come, depending on who the children are, I still put that out. It's like, feel free. The floor is too hard. Just run around, do your cartwheels on the floor, do your somersaults on this. And my children build a whole playground inside the house because we live in a rainy weather. So they did a slide and a trampoline and a jump on and climb on. And people obstruct the kids. Don't climb here. Don't do this. Don't do that. We're in a home. Don't climb on the couch. Don't walk on the table. And I'm not saying they should walk on the table. I think we had very clear boundaries with our children. But there were things, and couch was one of them, where they could do whatever they want. And we support them. So that brings out, so like they built a whole playground in the playroom area, and they learn so much from it. You know, they're creating, they're measuring, they're figuring out what throws them how, from how high they can jump. And then what the result is, what I see again and again, is that the child who is free gets interested. You know, we say they don't focus on the learning we give them. That's because they're not interested in that. They're interested in something else. And when they're free, they discover that something else. And all of a sudden they focus. And I see children who originally are marked as ADHD or some other focus learning issues, focusing unbelievable focus when it's what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if don't, we're not dictators. We need to be interested. Of course, what comes in immediately is like, but they have to learn math. They have to learn to read. First of all, I don't think they have to learn math in today's world, unless they want to be a physicist or a doctor or architect. Mm-hmm. And then what my experience is that they can learn it in a couple of months to pass the test to get into the university of their choice to become that. But it's not a necessity for everybody. Reading, yes, they need reading. Have you ever seen a child not learning to talk?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
there is no child left to their own. You read them books. They need to eventually find things online. There are signs all over the road while they ride with their parents or walk the streets. You will, if left alone, you will never find a child these days who will not learn to read. It's not possible. You can't stop them. You can't. And then, but back to your question, when they do it on their own, like I have 3 sons, they each taught themselves to read in a different way. Because they didn't only learn to read, they invented a method of teaching themselves to read. Just like they do with speaking. Each child learns to speak and they grasp it in different ways. It's much more difficult than learning to read. Mm-hmm. You know, hearing, you know, those adults are making noises and figuring out that it's words and they mean something, and then abstract concepts.
Right.
It's unbelievable. Reading is relatively easy. It's repeat symbols that say specific things. So I find that when they taught themselves to read, each in a completely different method and at a different age, you know, if you don't rush them to do what they're not, when the brain at age 6 of some child may not be the brain for learning to read. That brain may not yet distinguish right and left as changing the meaning, for example. Like a dog is a dog, whether the tail is here and the head is here, or the tail is here and the head is here, right? The door is a door, whether the handle is here, you know. Mm-hmm. So why would a child think that the moment we change it to the other side, it changes from B to D or from Q to P? It makes no sense. At some age, some children can't grasp that. Some children don't have that grasp yet. Or they can't, their eyes physically are not focusing on small things yet. Or right. other factors of reading are not yet in place, and we force them in that age to learn. Now the brain learns, I can't. Now the brain learns to go against itself, and it loses the opportunity to invent and find itself. Like, how does my brain operate?
Right.
My middle child's brain operated through music. He learned to read through music. The youngest one learned through writing. The oldest one is very visual, learned through seeing and pictures. Each one find their way, and that actually makes them more brilliant because they're reinforcing their own gifts when they're free, and they're more likely to find their own passion because they're going on their trajectory, not on somebody else's agenda that removes them from that or do it in the wrong timing so that it locks them in and makes and oppresses them. The joy, the all the excitement about life is like, oh, I guess I can't do what I'm excited about. I have to do this, and this is hard, and I'm disabled. People are treating me like there's a problem and I need to take medication or do these exercises or getting a special teacher, like something is wrong with me. And by age 18, they don't even remember that inner passion and that place. They have to work on themselves with therapy now for 20 years to get back to the brilliant, and some of them never do. So to retain that brilliant, that freedom, it's not license. We're not talking about children doing whatever they want to do. They learn from us and they can be guided by us, but they need support, not in going against themselves, but with themselves.
Yeah, it reminds me of Dr. Barkley, Russell Barkley, talking about ADD is not an attention deficit disorder. It's an interest challenge, I believe he says. And so it's not like they can't pay attention. It's that they are not interested and they want to pay attention to what they're interested in.
Yeah, and I think we need to let them do what they're interested and not force them to be interested in something else and forget who they are over the years.
Because eventually they're going to get the stuff that they're supposed to get, right?
Yeah.
Eventually they'll become interested.
Not only that, they always become interested. So if a child is into painting or into running around all the time, when they need to read because they become interested in that bug they saw on the ground and they can't understand what it is or want to identify. That's what my firstborn was like. He was out in nature. He would see things, was very interested in animals, and he wanted to know what they are. So it motivated him. He wanted to buy a book of birds, tropical birds, one day when he was 6, and he wanted to figure out how to read them because he wanted to know what they are.
Nice.
So that can happen at age 6, that can happen at age 15. There is no rush. In fact, when it comes to reading, by the way, brain development, in my experience, is better when we let them learn it as late as possible, because before they learn to read, they have a phenomenal memory. Have you noticed? Phenomenal. You read them a book, they know the book by heart. You read it 20 times, you still don't know it.
Yeah.
They recite the whole book.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. This is a great segue into the next part of the discussion, because the question that must be going through our viewers' minds right now is, so if I have them in school, right, a traditional public school or whatever, even a private school, there's a certain format they follow. So how do I allow my kid to read, 2 years later or 3 years later than the school is tracking? And so what is your answer to that?
Well, I wish to talk to the school administrators and to change the school, but it's hopeless. So I generally advise parents in these situations, if they must go to work, the parents and the child should go to school, to move to a place that has a democratic school or to homeschool.
Okay, let's talk about both of those things, right, real quick. Okay. Can you define a democratic school so we know what that is? And then I think we all kind of know what homeschool is, but we'll talk about homeschool after that. So what's a democratic school?
Well, I don't dare to define. I'm definitely not an expert. I never worked there or have any kid in there.
Sure, certainly more than we are.
But the democratic school is run democratically by the kids. Just to give you a view. So the kids are generally from age 4 to 19. There are no classrooms unless they create one. They have a school meeting of the kids once a week, where they vote on what they want to do. So if somebody says, I'm nuts about physics and I want to create a class, then, you can say it in the meeting and start a sign-up sheet. Any age can sign into it. They have their own justice system run by usually 6 kids and 1 adult. The adults are called staff members. They're not allowed to ever tell a child what to do or make comments on what they do, like praise and evaluation, grades for sure not, but not even praise and evaluation. The child is free of the adult commentary. And that I recommend in homeschooling too, and general parent-child relationship that I teach, to nurture that freedom by not becoming the evaluator that the child wants to please and live up to the expectations. So in the democratic school, when a child misbehaves, then they can file a complaint form that goes to this committee of 6 kids, which changes every, I don't know, month, or I don't know how long. Everybody gets to be eventually on that committee. So you fill up a form, and often just the filling of the form resolves the problem. But if it's more serious and it needs to get to the meeting, then it's decided there how to help that kid, what to do so they can improve that behavior or stop doing what they're doing or do what they're not doing or whatever it is. And I've been present. I visited those schools, a couple of them, and I've been present in that process, and it's fantastic. In many ways, the democratic school has an advantage over homeschool because it is community. It's hard with homeschool to do the social, which is very essential.
Fantastic. So are there a lot of democratic schools around? Or are they easy to find?
There are about 50 of them all over the country. Oh, and what they do there is basically play all day, but play in a whole community and create democratically rules to make things work. And they have usually a building with an art room and a music room and, different activities rooms, and adults who can help if the child asks for it, or if the child says, I want to create a class or activity. I have a lot of stories about this, but it would take too long for this time. Basically, they play, they do whatever they want. As they grow older, they get into things. So they have a lot of facilities. They decide they may see a piano somewhere and say, hey, they vote in the meeting that let's collect money and get this piano to the school. Usually they have one in the school, etc. So what was your question?
Well, let's talk about homeschooling now, because I don't want to run out of time. And I want to make sure that we get this in. So if you can give us a real brief description of homeschooling, because it sounds like you're schooling from the home, but I know there's more to it than that. And then why is, maybe we can go into how effective that is and what kids get out of that they don't get out of.
Well, it's avoiding the bad effect of the school, especially with a child who is not ready to read, needs a lot more activity, physical, climbing, running, doing things. I find that homeschooling does not have one clear definition. Hopefully it is not schooling at home. The name is, there is also the unschoolers who absolutely do not school at home, that are more like the democratic school. The kids are actually free. Like what we did was more like that. And my 3 sons are all university graduates with best grades. For anybody who's worried, no, they can all go to college. They can do what they want, even more so, because they actually start to study the subject of their joy way earlier because they're in touch with it. So they're not waiting for high school to finish, so now they can study what they're nuts about. But what happens in a homeschool is different from family to family, and the degree of intervention of the parents. Some of them are homeschoolers and do an hour or 2 a day of some actually regimented learning. I didn't do that. But then the child is free to play all day long. And usually, hopefully, those parents, even in the hour a day, are adjusting to what the kid is into and what they're ready to do. And then there is the other spectrum, the more unschoolers, like I said, where kids basically get up and if the parents are involved and engaged, they would provide the tools that the child seems drawn into, whether it's having a piano or having a trampoline or playing basketball or sports or hiking or science, and hire teachers if needed. Like we had to hire music teachers. I don't play cello. I did start them on the piano, but then I needed a much higher level and someone else to teach them. So you just, the child simply gets the chance to do all this energy. With the ADHD, that child is free to move instead of being constricted behind a desk, failing and unique and problematic and having to overcome all these problems. He experiences himself or herself as someone who is, running his own show with support of parents, and if there are hired teachers who do, karate with them or teach them somersaults or gymnastics or whatever it is.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you have a child with ADHD and they're struggling in school, then homeschool is the way to go, or even a democratic school, because they do get that custom, that they get to roll out their education based on what their interests are and where they're going.
Right. But again, I don't want to exclude any parent who has no choice but, no money to send to a private school, and they have to work, so they have to send the child to a public school. Please work with the public school authorities to release their pressure on the child. See if you can find a way to homeschool, like with help of other people. I've seen homeschoolers who simply have the child with another family in their work hours. Or consider not working. I've seen parents who realized, okay, we can simplify life and not work. I've even worked with a couple of families who decided to live simply. They sold their house and bought a giant yurt and made life really simple and didn't need to work. So I'm not telling people what to do, but if a child goes to school and is suffering in school with these things, your job, so let's say you can't do any of these things, I want to encourage parents that even the child who is put in that position and they have to learn to read, they need to hear from the parent to counterbalance. It's all right. You have your way. So when they come home, instead of the parent joining the teacher, okay, we need to work with you. So when you get to school, you meet the need of the teacher and you read at the same level. Instead of that, say, look, I'll talk to the teacher to slow down the expectations. At home, I want you to move around, or I want you to do your Play-Doh if that's what he wants to do, or to build, or to climb the trees, or whatever it is. So be on the child's side and represent. I always say to parents, be your child's lawyer in the face of the teacher, not the lawyer of the teacher or the other adult or the other relatives and what they expect. The child needs to know my mother understands my insight. She understands, or my father, they understand that I need to move, etc.
Right. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I want to get this in because you talk about lifestyle and how important lifestyle can be. Can you tell us about what you mean by lifestyle and what would you recommend?
Well, a lot of what we see as hyperactivity could be sensitivity to gluten, to dairy, definitely sugar. So I like when my client, what?
Caffeine, right?
Yeah,
chocolate, thing, right? Chocolate, soda, things like that.
A nursing mother who drinks herself or eat coffee will get a hyper baby. I mean, it starts early. But yeah, I mostly get my clients to move into Paleolithic diet. The brain needs fats and proteins, and unfortunately it's animal protein and fats. I find that there is a lot of hyperactivity that is totally food induced among vegans, and I have nothing against vegans. I don't want this to turn into political anything.
Sure.
But whatever our philosophy is, I was vegan for all my life until my firstborn at age 7 showed signs, illogical tantrums, and I did a blood test, and the naturopath, himself vegetarian, said, this kid cannot be vegan. He is not assimilating. I said, I do all the right combinations, etc. he's not assimilating his proteins and his B12, etc. You need to give him red meat. And I went like, oh no, red meat. Well, now I'm paleo because I learned that our whole family does not get it. But the child's brain and the baby brain, and this is also in pregnancy, it thrives, it needs fats and cholesterol. It needs animal fats and protein. So I suggest to parents to really focus on healthy, not fried, not processed food, but healthy animal protein. Eggs are great. Meat is great. Don't burn it. Don't fry it, like I said. And vegetables, and not as much fruit, which is also full of sugar, and not necessarily carrot juice, and definitely not fruit juice, which is much too much sugar. Right. So, and to find what the child is sensitive to, generally the grains, sugars, beans, I would take out.
And certainly being aware of the diet is where to start. But consider that they're not getting something if they're not correct.
That it could be food. And I remember working with a family where the child really calmed down the moment they took all grains and beans out and potatoes, starches. And then I was working with them in a family intensive. Sometimes I come to people's home. This was in their home. And the child was already very calm after the change that they learned from me before I came to work with them personally. And then the father came back with the children. He went out with them. And the moment the children came home, I looked at the boy and I saw he was completely high. And I said, what did you feed him? I suspected grains. And he said, oh, well, we had some noodles, a pile of noodles. I said, well, there you go. Be prepared for the next few hours. So, being aware of that. But there are other factors in lifestyle. Would you like me to?
Awesome. Well, I know that some people are thinking that are viewing this video is, so let's say I give my child freedom. And how does that, how do I keep them from just having run of the house, or, now all of a sudden they have, in this power struggle, they have all the power. And what you're going to give us today as a free gift, which is so thoughtful, is a video that talks specifically about how to not let the child have the power over you while you give them freedom. So if you're viewing this video wondering, how do I give them the freedom and not have them, have this control over the household or whatever? Naomi is giving you this link. It's a link below. It's a free gift of a video that's going to talk all about that. And it's called Cooperation Without Struggle. Awesome video that I think you should watch. And definitely it'll kind of help you understand that how do you give the freedom without giving away the power.
And you need a password to see it.
Okay. Fair enough. And then that'll be all in the instructions in the link. So so you'll know how to get that. Naomi, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your information. Totally different view, certainly for me, that, giving them more freedom would do that. But you're right. I could totally see how that would work. And, for some families, I think this could be a key that could really transform their household.
Well, I want to say that it has, in my work with families, I've transformed hundreds of such children into completely happy, cooperative children. The problem went away when we stopped controlling them and deciding how they should be.
Wow, that's fantastic.
But we don't want to give them license, and that's what my gift is about.
Awesome. Well, we have, if you want to get a hold of Naomi, or if you want to work with her, you want to see her website, you see some of the things that she does, or just send her an email. All the information is below. We have a link to her website, a link to her email address, and it'll be easy for you to get a hold of her and ask her any questions you may have to continue this conversation. So thank you so much, Naomi, for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. We'll see you on the next episode.